Today we have a mix of two cultures in this room. We have Australians and we have Japanese, but maybe converse, opposite to what you'd expect. I'm going to insist we have a very Australian day today, not a Japanese day. Even though we're in Japan, we're going for Australian style, and Australian style is very relaxed, so I'd like you all to relax. There's no pressure today. This is about beginning a journey together, so I guess this symposium is about beginning a conversation. So the idea is that what comes out of this symposium is better links between us all in this room, and we can develop this project further in the future. Okay. So I guess I should introduce myself first. My name is Gareth Thomas. I'm currently working at Bond University, and I was actually born in the UK. That's that little red area on the top left-hand corner. In the early 1990s, last century, I studied at Osaka City University, and I was very fortunate to meet a lot of fantastic people with whom I have still maintained strong links, and that's why we have such a it's because of those links that everyone has helped to contribute to this symposium, so thank you all. I spent 20 years in industry working with Sony, Hitachi and Canon, so I have quite an extensive Japanese corporate experience. I actually moved to Australia in 2007 and took my nationality. I'm an Australian citizen now, shortly after that. I guess you could say my background is that I'm a corporate entrepreneur. That's where most of my industrial experience was. But now I'm moved into academia, and I have a role as an assistant professor in strategy. And what I didn't tell you on this slide is that what interests me most is disruption and how that affects companies. That's what I'm studying mostly. So I believe that blockchain is a big disruptor in a very positive sense, and I'm hoping over the next 2 days that we can discover that. But while we start, sorry for the guys online, but this is just for us in the room here, just some housekeeping. The toilets, I'm told, Sano-san was...
This way.
Toilets are this way, so just a very short walk. You won't get lost, no problems. We have some coffee at the back there, so when Theo starts to talk for many hours and bores us, then please take the coffee to stay awake. You all have Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, Theo. You all have Wi-Fi passwords, hopefully, so you can get on the internet and do stuff. Yeah, all sorted. Great stuff. And when it comes to lunchtime, we'll actually be eating downstairs, not in here. So I think Sano-san's going to help us and direct us which way to go later on. Okay. So first of all, I want to thank our sponsors of this event. Obviously, our main sponsor is the Australia-Japan Foundation, and they put a lot of funds into this event and helping us to build bridges, so I'd like to say a big thank you to that team. But also we have a number of sponsors from universities. We've got Adelaide University, who has helped us with this project. We have the University of South Australia, my own university, Bond University, and of course Kyoto University has also been very kind and offered us a lot of support in terms of hosting and also personnel, people's time. And we're also very honoured to have representatives from two of Japan's biggest companies here. We have Okabe-san from Denso, and we also have Kishi-san from Mitsubishi Research Institute, so welcome to you gentlemen. And we also have two Australian smaller companies who are experts in blockchain, so I'm looking forward to hearing their presentations later. Trust Provenance and also ePopping. So I guess you'd expect me to thank the sponsors, but actually I also want to make a special thanks to two other people here. One of those is Tomoko Sano, who's now escaping, but without her help I would not have been able to organize this symposium. So she's been very fantastic, and I'd like to say a big thank you to her. And also to Graziella. She's unfortunately still in Adelaide. She can't be with us today, but she's been working so hard as well, so this is a big thank you to Graziella. Thank you, Graziella. Okay, so we'll start off with some geography lessons. That is Australia. So for those of you who don't know where Australia is, that's where we come from. The land down under, as the song goes. And there's Japan. If you don't know that's Japan, then I'm really worried about you, because I guess you should know about where Japan is. And from Australia, if you travel to Japan, it will take you approximately 9 hours. That's an 8,000 kilometer or more journey So we're lucky in that there is not much of a time zone difference, probably 1 or 2 hours. And the reason I say 1 or 2 hours is because Australia has multiple time zones, which can confuse the hell out of me. But anyway, that's what happens, particularly in South Australia, which is half an hour difference, and I believe one of the few in the world that has that. So that's where we are. That's Australia and that's Japan. So here's some figures about the differences between our two countries. There were 26 million people in Australia as of the 30th of September last year. Japan, by contrast, has a population of 125 million, so you can see a rather large difference in our populations there. One other striking difference, and you'll probably hear a lot about that over these next few days, is the annual growth of the population. So Australia's population grew by 1.6% last year. That's 418,500 people. And as I think everyone knows, in Japan, the population is shrinking. Last year, the annual growth rate was minus 0.7%. Another key feature of Australia is the number of immigrants. Of course, I'm talking as an immigrant here. So I was born overseas, and as of 2021, over 29% of Australians were actually born overseas. To me, that's an absolutely remarkable figure. And by contrast, only 2.2% of Japan's population was born overseas. So you can see that two countries have very different demographic makeups. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is about the size of Australia. So for those of you who haven't been fortunate enough to travel to Australia, it is really difficult for me to explain to you exactly how big Australia is. So I was born in the UK, and I guess the UK and Japan are not such a big different size. But when I came from the UK to Australia and I stood in the middle of the outback and I could see the curvature of the earth, that's how big Australia is. So it's absolutely astounding distances. And of course that means that obviously affects the population in terms of concentration, but the way we do business is obviously very different. So this is a business symposium, and if we talk about business, then these huge distances have a very strong effect on the Australian economy, such that really sometimes we don't actually have one economy. We have multiple economies which are based around our cities, because the gaps between the cities are so big that they're quite isolated, each market. So quite different from Japan in that respect. And as you can see there, actually Australia is over 20 times the size of Japan. So I have a question for you. Which country do you think has the longer coastline? Japan or Australia? Shall we take a vote? Who says Japan? What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who says Australia? Well, less fewer, I think maybe 4 or 5. Well, I can't believe how stupid you guys are, because obviously Australia's much bigger. How could you think that Japan had a longer coastline?
That's because we have a lot of separate islands.
And so does Australia. Okay, so some more facts and figures to bore you with. Just a little bit about the trade between the two countries. So Australia's biggest exports to Japan. Liquid natural gas is our biggest export, and almost $40 billion worth last year. Then we've got iron ore, we've got meat, aluminium, and then grains, seeds, and fruit. So you can see that this is an agricultural symposium, so you can see number 3 and number 5 there from an Australian perspective are very interesting for us. Now, as far as Japan's exports to Australia, then again, probably doesn't surprise you that vehicles, cars comes out at number 1, and then, well, quite a spread of other stuff there, although I'm not quite sure what rubber is. Maybe I need to talk to Tom Parnell about that afterwards, he can help me. Where that's used, I'm not sure, but anyway, so that gives you an idea. Now, I'm sure you'll spot one big thing here, and that's the big trade imbalance. Australia has a very positive trade balance with Japan. or from a Japanese perspective, Japan has a very negative trade balance with Australia. So, but nevertheless, it shows you how critical trade is between our two countries. So, let's focus a little more on agricultural products here. And one of the characteristics of the Japanese market is how dependent Japan is on imports of food. And I took this slide from the Financial Times, and you can see that how important, certainly for example, cooking oils are for Japanese food. Almost all of the cooking oil coming from Australia. Then you look at livestock, wheat, soybeans, etc. And the key thing to look at when we look at these figures is how much of an outlier Japan actually is. Japan has dangerously low self-sufficiency rates of food. So if you look at by calorific intake, in other words, how much calories we take each day, Japan has around, I think it's 35% only of calorific intake is actually domestically produced. And of course the big exporting countries like Australia and Canada, you can see that's 250, 275%, so very different type of markets. So Australia is an exporting market of raw materials and agricultural products. Japan is an importing market of raw materials and agricultural products. So another way of looking at that is this slide here, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. I found this one from the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry Fisheries. And this tells you, if you look at the 1 person per day calorie intake, so this is a bit of fun, yeah? It's not a real data analysis yet, but it gives you an idea of where Japan's food is coming from. If we say that the average person in Japan has 2,269 calories per day, that's based on figures from 3 years ago, domestic produced food only accounts for 37% of that. The rest of it is imported. So you could summarize that by saying 50% of food depends on imports from just 4 countries. I think this is a remarkable figure. So if you look at the US, Canada, Australia, Brazil, and Malaysia as well, you add those together, and those countries will supply 50% of the calorific intake for Japanese citizens. So you can imagine this is causing some concern for the Japanese government. They are concerned about how dependent the country is on importations of food. And they are becoming more concerned about that for these 4 reasons here. Of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has caused a lot of destabilization in energy markets and also in energy prices. Within Japan, Japan has been going through a rationalization of its supermarket structures. So over the past few years, I think presenters will talk about this later, that there's been a shrinking number of supermarkets, a concentration in the big supermarket companies. So this process, this agglomeration, has helped reduce prices. So it's helped hold prices down for Japanese consumers because the supermarkets are becoming more efficient. So that's been a positive thing, but that period is now coming to an end. So the supermarket's abilities to hold prices down is coming towards an end. And of course, the yen is very weak against the dollar now. So there's these 4 reasons here which are causing pressure, increased pressure on the Japanese domestic food market. And this is not going to get any better. I've added a further 5 forces that are undermining the current system. So supply chains have been disrupted, and that's the war in Ukraine has a big influence on that. Of course, we've had COVID, Corona-19, which has caused disruption. We can expect further changes in climate. Climate change is also going to disrupt these supply chains. Energy market prices are going up, and particularly for Japan, the fertilizer prices here are also going up. So that means extra price pressures on the domestic market to keep the prices down. So this is where the Japanese government towards the end of last year, they released this food security reinforcement policy framework. So basically, the aim of this framework from the Japanese government is to create structural transformation. They want to move away from an excessive dependency on foreign imports. And particularly when it comes to foreign imports from certain countries which may not be in Japan's strategic interest. So I picked up some of the findings from this report and some of the targets that the government has imposed. So they want to have food loss, they want to reduce and absorb greenhouse gases, and they want to increase organic farming. So I picked out those three, but you can see there are others on that slide as well. So why have I picked up those three? Well, this is where I want to introduce blockchain to you. So first of all, I should say I am not a blockchain expert, and it makes me very nervous standing up here talking about blockchain in front of people who are blockchain experts. So hopefully I'm going to get my explanation right, but certainly I know we'll learn more about blockchain in the next 2 days. So blockchain is basically a way of controlling and certifying data. It's a way of independently checking what data is being held, and then that data can be held very securely. And the data then can be shared amongst parties depending on what those parties agree to. So I had a beginning of my career, I worked in an electronics factory, and the idea of batch control and product quality was always drummed into us very hard. And I get the feeling that there's a lot of similarities between this sort of Toyota Kanban system and what blockchain can do for us in terms of way of controlling the way product flows through the supply chains and increasing traceability. And I'm sure Okabe-san will talk about that much better than I can in the next day or so. So that's blockchain. So blockchain can increase traceability. It can give people, customers, consumers, an idea of where product is coming from. It can improve governance systems because governance becomes traceable. What is happening in our supply chains? What decisions are being made? It can help optimize supply chain. So it tells you where the product is being stored or stocked at any one time. And that can improve on excessive stock holdings. It can also improve on waste. And of course, the bottom one I put there is also, it's a big point of difference for companies. Giving this sort of visibility to the market and to consumers is a real point of difference. It's a way of disrupting the market and showing a clear advantage for their company over the competition. So let's look again at those government characteristics, government targets, I'm sorry. I think you can see there that blockchain can definitely contribute to some of these targets. So if we talk about halving food loss, then if we know where in the blockchain where the products are being wasted or stored or excessively stored, that sort of access to information can help us highlight bottlenecks in the flow of product. So that's definitely something that blockchain can help to reduce. Another target was to reduce and absorb greenhouse gases. So blockchain is another way of gathering data from supply chains on things like carbon, how much carbon is being consumed in a certain process. So it can help to analyze the data that comes from the blockchain, can help to analyze what is happening in the supply chain. And of course, if you're interested in organic farming, then blockchain can also give you visibility in your supply chain about where your product is coming from. You actually know this product is coming from a certified organic farm, for example. So hopefully you've seen what I've tried to show briefly this morning is that blockchain is a way in which it's a tool that can help us tackle a lot of the problems that are critical not only for Japan, but can also provide a point of difference for Australian producers as well. If they can step up and produce this information, it helps Japan as well and Japanese consumers. Okay, so I have just a few more points to make, and then I'll pass over to Ishii-san. So just a little bit of talk about the running order and our format here today and tomorrow. So I allocated an hour slot for each presenter. So I don't expect you to talk for an hour, and that's even you, Theo, okay? Don't talk for an hour. Maybe just 40 minutes or so, and then allow us a Q&A session of perhaps 15 minutes. And I've invited these three gentlemen who sit over here to act as a panel. I should have put you guys in order on the slide, shouldn't I? Anyway, Deepak, Tom, and Yara Sensei as a panel to encourage discussion after each presenter and maybe tease out some ideas and projects that we can work on in the future. So today, from 10 o'clock, looks like I'm eating into your time, I'm sorry. We have a presentation from Kohei Kishi from Mitsubishi Institute. Then we have Natalie Take, who will talk from eBotly about blockchain. We'll take some lunch. And then in the afternoon, Okabe-san from Denso will talk about food traceability systems. Then we are fortunate to have Theo here, who's vast experience in this area. I'm really looking forward to his presentation. And he's going to talk about trade relations in South Australia. And then the last presenter of the day is Nomiya Sensei, who's going to talk about value chain and perishable goods in Japan. So I look forward to hearing all that. 4 o'clock is our close time. So I'll just leave this one slide with you as a sort of summary. And I picked up this quotation from the Financial Times. This is a gentleman by the name of Atsushi Suginaka, who is the Director General for Policy Coordination at MAF in Japan. And he said, the biggest problem facing agriculture is the lack of a willingness to take on new challenges. For an aging population, it's difficult to try something different, and that's why we need the participation of younger people. So I really hope today that we can get some energy from the younger people in the audience, from the students at Kyoto University, who can help us older generation people learn some new things about how the market's developing and how blockchain can contribute. Okay, so thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand over to Kishi.